The message arrived precisely as I was concluding the wedding menu with my mother. "You will never surpass me," I stated. "I informed you years ago that I would consistently be first." Delight in observing from the on the sidelines. I gazed at my phone, fingers poised over the screen. Words became indistinct for an instant before transitioning into clarity. Emily had accomplished it. My utmost focus was on her. My merely hood friend had appropriated my fiancé, as well as my venue. The floral arrangements for the wedding date. Had invested months in selecting it. My wedding day is scheduled in 4 days, instead of weeks. It would belong to her. I did not react, did not allow the shock to register. My mother is seated across from me, observing my face, containing a compilation of catering alternatives. Observed briefly. "Is everything satisfactory, beloved?" I locked eyes with her and grinned. Indeed, she reverted to her notes. None the wiser within my realm had merely. I felt fragmented upon reflecting on the cautionary indicators. Emily had been present all along. Has consistently exhibited competitiveness, albeit not in the conventional manner that motivates individuals to improve, yet in the manner in which one must demand from another. To lose for her to win commenced in the necessity for excellence in infancy. The perfect grades receive the greatest attention. I envisioned it, although I never anticipated she would seize it. At this point, I should have recognized the change many months ago when Emily abruptly became very invested with my wedding arrangements. She volunteered to assist in selecting my place. She insisted on attending the dress fittings. She expressed enthusiasm for every aspect within. Zeal that, in retrospect, appeared excessive, enthusiastic, followed by her manner of. It was not apparent when observing Daniel. Initially, merely a long gaze here. An amusing nuance present in that context. It may be seen as innocuous. Until 2 weeks ago, Daniel had experienced estrangement and the cancellation of date evenings, refrained from discussing the wedding expenditures, increased duration at work. I believed it was merely pre-wedding apprehensions followed by his abrupt disappearance. No reason, no discussion regarding the separation. A month of silence ensued. I called him with no response. And subsequently, I sent a text message. He received nothing, and suddenly Emily was present. I ought to have experienced anger instead of rejoicing. Overwhelmed by grief, rather than feeling ashamed, I experienced a sense of tranquility. Emily, I believed she had triumphed. But you will never surpass life. My future, or my happiness, what does she symbolize? Was unaware. What neither of them was aware of was that I never falter. For she was commemorating her hijacked engagement. I have been planning and took a deep breath, stabilizing myself prior to composing my respond with a brief, uncomplicated term. Things would hold no significance for her in this, at this moment, but in 4 weeks on her wedding day, she would comprehend precisely what I concealed my phone and selected. Establish a catering service. My mother persisted in conversing about entre, blissfully ignorant that everything had transformed. Emily had assumed control. All that I present is now at your disposal. It is my turn. And I would not require theft. I simply have to allow her autonomy. Her choices obliterate the days. After Emily's message, an unsettling atmosphere emerged. Reserved Daniel never contacted Emily. Never boasted again. It was as if in her, my consciousness has already diminished into. The woman's loss is irrelevant. She was unaware that I was not. I was waiting. Broken. I did not weep. I refrained from expressing anger and concealed my emotions from others. Even the minutest fissure in my composure. Instead, I acted precisely as Emily anticipated my inaction due to. Revenge does not invariably need action. Occasionally, the most effective method of annihilation. Someone must allow them to proceed directly. Independently. Emily was oblivious to the disaster. I'm about to enter my week. Subsequently, I received an invitation. Exquisite gold embossed envelope. Delivered to my residence. I identified the immediate handwriting. Emily. I inserted my finger beneath the seal. And revealed the substantial invitation. You are formally invited to the wedding of Emily Carter and Daniel. Rite is scheduled for the 14th of June at the Magnolia Estate. my venue, my date, the audacity to invite to the wedding. Me. The arrogance was astonishing in its magnitude. The triviality of it nearly provoked laughter in me. That was the moment I realized I had triumphed previously. The conflict commenced only due to insecure individuals require an audience for their. Emily desired my presence at the victories. To celebrate. She needs observation. My suffering needs to revel in my humiliation, but I was unwilling to concede. That I instead. Her. I have RSVP'd and eagerly anticipate the event. Everyone present due to what she had not. The guest list was considered. The Magnolia Estate mandated all weddings. Party to provide a definitive guest list. Confirmation 3 weeks prior to the event. Since Emily has appropriated everything previously, moment she had effortlessly assumed control of my currently available reservation, indicating she had never substantially modified the guest list, and neither did I have every individual on that list. My community, my relatives, my childhood companions, my colleagues, including Daniel's parents, who cherished me as the sole individual genuinely devoted to her. Overwhelmed, and within a little period, in weeks, she would acknowledge her error. Nothing can undermine a bride's significant day. Thora pursued joy, acknowledging each individual guest. In the room is covertly supporting. Someone else possesses the conclusive evidence regarding Emily. Was oblivious to her own demise. The day of her dress fitting with a mutual acquaintance. Hannah extended an invitation for coffee. Her look in the morning was well composed. Neutral regarding Emily's dress. She inquired about the appointment scheduled for today. I nodded while slowly stirring her cappuccino. Consuming my tea. Really, I am. It has come to my attention that she extended an invitation to several of us to participate. How magnanimous of her, I remarked. Hannah hesitated momentarily. You adorned her with your attire. I did not flinch. I did not respond at all. Entirely due to the fact that she was indeed possessed of. Removed all items. Otherwise, why would she not don the dress I had selected for myself? However, the disparity between us was unnecessary for me. A clothing to be the focal point. Emily. She believed she was the focus of attention. But she wasn't. The notion that she was only another actress in my narrative. And within 3 weeks, she would discover. The morning of June 14th was luminous. And warm. The quintessential perfect summer day. The bride's dream of Emily must have been profound. Imperturbable as she prepared amidst Hannah's surroundings. By hairstylists and makeup artists. Reveling in the radiance of her perceptions. Was her triumph. She had appropriated my wedding, my fiancé, my venue, everything. Had devoted months to planning. Yet what I did not understand that this day was. It was never hers to possess, it was always. It was now time for the finale. Act 1 commence early. My early arrival as I exited my automobile just as the initial guests commenced. The estate was breathtakingly beautiful. Precisely as I had envisioned it when I reserved it almost a year prior. The floral arch, the lovely white seats. Candlelight reception hall with all my selections. Emily retained all items except for one. Items she ought to possess. I observed the initial transformations. Guests arrived at the check-in table. Folks I had known for years. Family members that articulated me throughout. I observed their hesitancy in all I could see. Their gazes at the wedding itinerary, featuring the names of Emily and Daniel. The gold whisper commenced nearly. Isn't this meant to be immediate? Her wedding venue was taken from her. The day the rumor disseminated. Wildfire followed by Daniel's parents. When he arrived, his mother, Linda, had never been present. Discreet regarding her aversion to Emily. She had consistently cherished me and frequently asserted that I was the type of lady Daniel required. Composed and benevolent. Powerful upon observing me standing. They composed themselves and smiled. A transformation occurred within her. She said, "Expression, sweetheart," while taking my, "What are you doing here?" I tilted my cranium in surprise. Prior to her expression hardening, she faced the check-in table. Voice resonating through the courtyard. "Where is my?" A stillness enveloped the gathering. Initiated within the bridal suite. Emily on her aversion to pain in her presence. Bridesmaids or what remained of them. Several of them had already texted me discreetly. I apologize for my involvement in this situation. However, I did not require their allegiance, I possessed it. Exhibited a relocation within her while she examined her phone. Eventually observed the "and what are you doing with your hands, hey Emily? Were you aware that 90% of your guests comprise her family and friends? Megan, you extended an invitation to Daniel's parents, correct? They appear to die executing frequently from. We need to speak with Daniel immediately." Emily's champagne flute fell from her grasp, hand gliding along her silk. "What the hell?" she whispered outside. Daniel was pacing near the altar. His hands ran through his hair, something was amiss. He had anticipated bliss, commemoration, anticipation. Instead, he was encircled by uncomfortable pauses and accusatory glances. Best man Matt assisted him. "Did you even observe the guest? Side dude?" Matt murmured that this is not a wedding. It is an execution. Daniel frowned. "What are you discussing?" Matt presented him with the Donnie, we need to discuss matters about him. Guest list. Recognition of names emerged gradually thereafter. Horror, his throat became parched. These belonged to her. Individuals with whom Emily had been too preoccupied conducting my wedding that she had not attended. Took the initiative to personalize it. Entered directly into my realm. My circle. My uncomfortable pauses and incisive surroundings are once again present. Recognizing that no one was genuinely present for. The guests were not rejoicing. Were observing. He observed me standing nearby after a period of waiting. The back is adorned in a serene and lovely dress. He swallowed hard as she arrived. Matt recognition of names emerged gradually. Excessively preoccupied with self-satisfaction to interrogate it. Daniel abruptly experienced a sensation of suffocation. It would have been a mistake had he been present. Manipulated his abdomen, he required assistance. See. Emily and Daniel abruptly entered the bridal suite. Emily turned her eyes without knocking on the suite. Radiating with fury and, "What are you doing here? Nerves? Were you not meant to see me beforehand?" He excluded her from the guest list. His voice was sharp. Emily blinked. He thrust the paper into her hands. "They are coming for her. Emily, not for us." Glanced over the unoccupied with self-satisfaction to inquire. Her face became devoid of color around the borders. The hue on which she had concentrated. Stealing my wedding that she did not possess. I acknowledged that she had also appropriated my audience. Panic manifested on her face. It was not her moment. Mine. Who is concerned? Compelled a laugh. It is. They will still celebrate our wedding. Daniel seems unconvinced. Because he now comprehended the theft. His voice was piercing. Emily. The judgment of the attendees. Who were not genuinely their guests. It impacted. He had simultaneously been a pawn in. Emily extended her hand towards him. But he moved aside. "I require a moment," she murmured, observing in silence as he exited, and in the ensuing silence, ultimately pursued Emily, recognized that she could be donning the garment. However, I was the individual present in. The control of the morning of June 14th was radiant and temperate, the quintessential ideal. Emily must dream of a summer day for brides. Felt invulnerable as she prepared. Enveloped by hairstylists and cosmetics. Artists reveling in the radiance of her. Believed to be her. She had usurped my wedding victory. Fiancé. My venue. All expenditures incurred. Months. Formulating strategies, nonetheless. She was unaware that this day was never hers to claim. Has perpetually belonged to me. And now it is. It is time for the final act. I arrived early. Exiting my vehicle precisely as the initial guests commenced arriving at the estate. Exquisite. Precisely as I had envisioned. When I reserved it over a year ago. The exquisite white seats are arranged beneath the floral arch. Reception hall illuminated by candles. Including all my selections. Emily retained all items except for one. Items she ought to possess. I observed the initial few changes. Guests approached the registration table. Acquaintances I had been acquainted with for years. Family. Members that had assisted me throughout. I observed their hesitancy. Their gazes at the wedding itinerary. Featuring the names of Emily and Daniel. Gold whispers commenced nearly. Isn't this meant to be immediate? Her wedding venue was taken from her the day the rumor disseminated. Following the wildfire, Daniel's parents arrived. His mother, Linda, had always been overt about her dislike of. She had consistently adored me and frequently expressed it. She was the type of lady that Daniel required. Composed and benevolent. Robust upon perceiving my presence. They were composed and smiling at something shifted in her expression. Sweetheart, she remarked, taking my hands. What are you doing? I slightly tilted my head. Invited. Her mouth opened in astonishment. She turned before her stare sharpened. Directed towards the check-in table. Her voice carrying through the "Where is my courtyard?" Silence enveloped the guests. Initiated within the bridal suite, Emily was imbibing champagne in the company of the remaining bridesmaids. Several of them had already messaged me discreetly. I apologize for my involvement in this situation. However, I did not require their allegiance, I possessed it. Exercised patience while checking her phone. Eventually observed the influx of texts. Hannah, Emily, were you aware that 90% of your Megan's guests comprise her family and friends? You invited Daniel's parents, correct? Do not appear content, and then ask Daniel for clarification. Himself, we need to talk. Emily's champagne flute has now slipped in, her hand gliding over her silk robe. She growled in frustration outside. What the hell, Daniel? Pacing adjacent to the altar, manipulating his hands. Something was up with his hair. Anticipated a joyous party. Anticipation, instead, he was encircled by awkward silences and pointed. His best man, Matt, assisted him up the stairs. Aside, did you even examine the? Matt muttered that this is not a guest list. Wedding, it is an execution. Daniel frowned. What are you discussing? Matt presented him with the. Daniel examined the printed guest list. Name recognition dawned slowly. Then, horror, these are all his throats. These are her people. Emily had gone dry. I have been exceedingly preoccupied with capturing my wedding, that she had not taken the effort to make it her own. She had directly entered my circle, my world. Legacy. Daniel surveyed his surroundings once more, recognizing that no one was genuinely present for. The guests were not rejoicing. Were observing. After a period of waiting, he observed me standing nearby. The back is adorned in an attractive garment, exuding calmness. He swallowed hard as she arrived. Matt informed him that Emily had also RSVP'd, busy being smug to question. Daniel immediately felt suffocated. This has been a mistake had he been utilized. His stomach twisted, he required visual confirmation. Emily and Daniel abruptly entered the bridal suite. Emily turned her eyes without knocking on the suite, radiating with fury and anxiety. What are you doing here? You do not belong. Were you expected to see me beforehand? Examine the guest list. He excluded her. His voice sharp. Emily squinted as he inserted the paper into. Her hands are present for Emily, not for anybody else. She skimmed the names with her fingers. Constriction along the periphery of her visage. Devoid of hue, she had been intensely concentrated. Regarding the theft of my wedding that she did not own. I acknowledged that she had also appropriated my audience. Panic manifested on her visage. It was not her moment. Mine. Who is concerned? Compelled a laugh. It is. They will still celebrate our wedding. Daniel appeared unconvinced due to. He now comprehended the purloined nuptials. Coerced participation of the guests who were not. It struck him suddenly that they were indeed his guests. Previously, he had been a mere pawn in her strategy. Emily extended her hand towards him, but he retreated back. He whispered that he required a minute, and she observed, rendered mute as he exited and entered. The stillness that ensued after Emily recognized that she could be donning the garment. However, I maintained control as the ceremonial time neared. Emily stood adjacent to the grand entrance of the estate, grasping her bouquet excessively tightly. Guests. Daniel exchanged glances in a hushed manner. Her wonderful day had not returned, collapsing prior to its inception. And as I sit with my champagne, observing the events as they occur, reflected on her statement from weeks prior. You'll never outshine. Oh, Emily, I never required it, I only possessed it. To allow you to succumb to your own entrapment. Minutes elapsed slowly, and guests, feeling suffocated, shuffled awkwardly inside their seats, their whispers intensifying. The ceremony was intended to be louder. Initiated 20 minutes ago, although there was no. The groom stands at the altar, devoid of music and without Emily. Remained indoors, positioned adjacent to the grand. Her grasp on the bouquet is so tight that her knuckles had become pale. Daniel had not returned her adequate noise. The stolen wedding was disintegrating prior. It commenced, and I was just where I had to observe Emily's maid of honor approached Lauren with hesitation. Emily. Perhaps we should disregard Emily's voice. He was acutely anxious, his nervousness was palpable. Lauren bit her lip, knowing that he would return. It has been nearly 30 minutes since Emily turned. Her breath was irregular. He will arrive, albeit later. She was no longer persuaded by the guests. Crucially, Daniel was aware that he possessed, ultimately discerned, her while Emily remained immobilized inside. Daniel was outside, pacing near the estate's fountain's tuxedo jacket, unfastened his tie and relaxed it. His father stood beside him, arms crossed. This is a catastrophe, Daniel murmured as raking his fingers through his hair. His father breathed. No, son, this is a lesson. Daniel scowled. What is that? Intended to signify his father's gaze was. You departed from a formidable and astute woman for a juvenile solitary game. One-upmanship. And now you are comprehending what everyone else observed months prior. Daniel swallowed audibly, indicating his reluctance to observe. Concerning Daniel, his father, do you observe an individual here that genuinely rejoices at your success, or are they all merely awaiting the inevitable? Daniel's hands clenched into. He desired to protest, yet he was unable to do so because his father was present. Emily's world was disintegrating. Initially, it was. Daniel's aunt and uncle were the first to rise from their seats and silently. Subsequently, a few other people arrived. The moment Daniel's mother faced, she addressed her husband emphatically, stating that we ought to depart. No wedding is occurring today. The events unfolded in a cascading fashion, reminiscent of the Exodus. The visitors departed individually. Emily observed as they exited the seats, astonished. Immobilized on her significant day. Flawless vengeance eluded her. She was unable to stop it with her fingers. In a fit of anger, she hurled the bouquet towards the racing through the estate in heels, striking furiously at the smooth. Daniel had not returned to the floors. She would find him at the altar. Sighted him by the fountain. Standing in, she marched in silence alongside her father. Directly to him, disregarding the stares from the final remaining guests. Her voice was loud, hysterical. What are you doing? Acquire. Daniel turned slowly within. Expression. Emily's breath caught. Appeared distinct, not ambiguous. Daniel had been found guilty. She made another attempt. This time, it is gentler. I am aware that this is. His actions were overwhelming, yet he severed ties with Emily. His speech was calm, contrasting with Emily's expression. It is twisted. You cannot possibly mean that. Daniel. He breathed, then removed his ring. And just like that, it concluded. Emily remained stationary, gazing at the engagement. Placed the ring on Daniel's open palm as though she was incomprehensible. Occurring, however, I was able to do so since this was. Inevitably, she had constructed her entire strategy. Regarding victory, however, this was not a competition. She wasn't the only player who needed improvement. Daniel inadvertently dropped the ring. He turned away from the fountain and departed. His family accompanied his groomsmen. Followed, and ultimately the few remaining attendees. Abandoned Emily stood there in her stolen gown for her illicit wedding with only the remnants of her own remain. I merely acknowledge my errors. Observed, as occasionally the optimal. Revenge is not revenge at all, it is permitting individuals to self-destruct as I departed from the Magnolia estate. A sensation of tranquility enveloped me. Emily had. She attempted to surpass me. She ultimately possessed everything except for the conclusion. I acquired nothing because theft is not permitted. What was never genuinely yours. And regarding myself, I did not lose anything, I merely relinquished it. An entity that was never deserving of retention. It had been 1 year since the wedding. Much has changed. Emily, it never occurred. Vanished from our social circles. Nearly instantaneously, she transformed from the woman who possessed everything to the woman whom no one acknowledged, desired to be affiliated with initially. She attempted to manipulate the narrative. Daniel experienced trepidation at the situation. The burden of a wedding was overwhelming for. However, individuals were aware of the truth they possessed. Observed the guest list they had examined. Vacant chairs where they witnessed her defeat. Real-time control and more functionalities. Significantly, they had observed me depart. Alongside my dignity. Intact. As for Daniel, he extended a. Several months later. It was a late evening. Communication that oozes with. I'm sorry that I do not anticipate your forgiveness. I acknowledge that you were correct. Perused the message and smiled. Then I. Removed it due to the absence of closure. Closure is attained by the reception of an apology. From the understanding that you never required one. I. Received information from common acquaintances regarding Emily. Attempted to reconstruct her. Notoriously, she started dating once more. An affluent elderly man, perhaps attempting to ensure a future she was unable to. The theft was short-lived due to public reaction. Like Emily, always pursuing something. Never succumb to any form of manipulation. Can compel someone to love you without coercion. Venue not appropriated. Fiancé not appropriated. Wedding not appropriated. Can provide you with what is not intended for you. She possessed all the necessary elements for a instant, and now she possessed. I have no regrets about my past. It happened, but I never needed to yell. Never had to. I never had to descend to her level. All I needed to do was remain silent and allow her path, herself, as the most effective revenge is not. Destroying another individual's life is detrimental. Indeed, they lacked the capacity to destroy yours, and I departed with precisely what I required, my tranquility, integrity and a vastly improved existence. Absent their presence, as Emily, I was still pursuing an illusion. They are inside my reality. And believe me, it surpasses any illicit wedding.